On this week's NFV SDN Reality Check, we speak with the Linux Foundation to discuss its recent move to consolidate its open source ECOMP and Open-O initiatives into the new ONAP platform. All right, well, thanks for joining us for this week's NFV SDN Reality Check. I'm your host, Dan Meyer, Editor-in-Chief here at RCR Wireless News. And this week we are joined by Arpit Joshipura, who's the GM for Networking and Orchestration at the Linux Foundation, to talk a bit about some recent initiatives at the Linux Foundation to combine some of their initiatives there with the ECOMP and ONAP, or into ONAP with Open-O as well. So Arpit, thanks for joining us this week. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Excited to be on.
Very good. Well, maybe we'll start off with, I know you just started there in December. Maybe you want to give a little, just a brief, kind of what you've seen so far in your short few months there at the Linux Foundation there.
Sure, Dan. So as you know, networking has been about, 3-decade-old industry, but it's cool again. and the reason it's cool is, open source is now mainstream. And open source networking is a big component of how enterprise carriers and cloud build the entire end-to-end stack. So what I've seen, since I've joined Linux Foundation, is we are in what I call the phase 3 of open source networking. 5 years ago, proprietary systems were all disaggregated and separated and sprinkled into components. All these components started having open source projects. That was phase 2. And then very quickly, these components became production ready, right? Whether it's ODL, OPNFV, etc. And this year, what I see is the start of phase 3, which is these production ready components are coming together in a more holistic end-to-end view. And so the consumption models and the carriers, as well as the enterprises, are really excited because now they can actually put a solution in production versus just, open source components.
Makes sense. Yeah, obviously, I know the past couple of years, it's been a lot of work behind the scenes there, getting these things together, different initiatives coming out. So yeah, it's good to kind of hear that we're maybe to that point now where we'll start seeing some real commercial products based on all this work over the past, like you said, 5 years or so.
Exactly.
Not really, but still a lot of work happening behind the scenes there.
Exactly.
Exactly. Very good. Well, I know one thing I want to touch base with you on was, I guess, this new initiative you guys kind of came out with recently with ONAP, which is the combining of the open source ECOMP and Open-O into a new, platform there. Maybe give a little, maybe a high-level view of what the announcement was about, kind of what's behind what this new initiative from Linux Foundation is.
Sure. As people are familiar with the networking and orchestration systems, your readers are very well versed with the whole stack.
I hope so.
Yes. I won't bore them with the these things, right? But if you look at the layer above the control plane, all the way through to the application layer, and if you look at the design, execution, and production environments, that was kind of a missing piece. And so many open source projects started to sort of stitch that part of the stack together. Open-O was a Linux Foundation project that started a year ago, and it has been making steady progress with release 1, release 2, etc. And last year, AT&T announced that they're moving ECOMP to Linux Foundation. And then earlier this month, in February, it was announced that Linux Foundation has taken it over. So what we did was we brought, two of the largest communities together, the ECOMP community and the Open-O community, in a very mutually complementary way by using the best of both worlds, if you may. Mm-hmm. And so, the largest operators like AT&T or China Mobile, China Telecom, China Unicom, right? Orange, Bell Canada, along with a whole set of, vendors are all coming together. Pretty much everybody in the networking ecosystem is extremely excited because, with a neutral governance like a Linux Foundation, we now have one framework and one platform for network automation. And that's what ONAP is all about. It includes everything from control to orchestration, to policies, to management, to analytics, right? Design portals, you name it. And it has the best of both worlds, right? So both Yang models, the Tosca models are in there. There are SDKs for virtual functions. There's virtual function controllers that are brought in as some of the most recent innovations. So we believe that merging and integrating and harmonizing the two open source projects gives a heads up and a very fast adoption cycle to the end users.
Makes sense. I guess, was that kind of the main reason behind this, was to kind of make it, I guess, simpler or easier for those coming into the ecosystem to kind of not have to pick and choose an avenue to go down, to kind of bring something together that's maybe a single type of source for people to kind of be a little more comfortable with? I mean, whenever there's choice, I mean, choice is always good, but sometimes when you go into deployment, you don't want to have too many choices out there. Was that kind of the basis for this, to kind of make it easier for everybody to kind of be on the same page?
That was one of them, right? Specifically from an end user and a vendor perspective, right? Okay. But I think the most important driver that we need, if you step back, is, what's the value of ONAP? And the value is really around automation. It's network automation, right? And as we move to a 5G world, I've always stated that you better be automated, because you're not going to have an IoT device that gets connected on a network, waiting for 10 minutes on a phone call saying, can I add you in? It's just not going to happen, right? Yeah. So it's a prerequisite, if you may, to get automation going. Now, the great news is, with production-ready code that AT&T wrote on ECOMP, as well as production-ready code that was written for Open-O in a mutually exclusive manner, once we bring the two together, now you have the basis of network automation. That's a big enabler for 5G. I mean, that's your macro driver. Yeah. Now, to your point, when communities come together, typically projects get incubated with a lot of innovation that solves very specific use cases, right? And then they innovate around it, and then they expand. We're at a point where, from an orchestration perspective, since it's higher up the stack, while choices are great, this is, you still have choices within.
Sure.
At least the community by which people come together is kind of one.
Yeah, got it. And I guess should members or people looking, or vendors and operators looking at this, should there be a greater sense that the orchestration of all of this is coming along at a good pace? Because it does seem like, I know, talking to companies in the past couple of years about this, orchestration was always kind of one of those sticking points where everybody knew we needed it, but it seemed like there's always this challenge of kind of bringing together all this into a single platform, or a way that would work across the industry, and obviously trying to tie in legacy systems and new systems as we go to 5G, obviously. There's such a big challenge there. I guess, should this be a good confidence boost for companies coming involved in this, that this layer, this orchestration part of it, is becoming more robust and more, I guess, commercial ready, if that's the right word for it?
Absolutely. And this, as I said, was the missing piece. Because at the end of the day, an operator is, interested in launching a service, whether it's network on demand, business VoIP, residential broadband, whatever, right? That service is launched through their catalogs for their markets, right? And then everything below it is just work, CapEx and OpEx. And so the more automation is there, right, and the more simplification is there to enable these services in a matter of minutes, versus it takes weeks and hours and even months sometimes to get some of these services on board. So that's predominantly the value added driver for all of these to come together, right? And so it's a no-brainer from an end user perspective, and from a vendor perspective, it's absolutely no-brainer. I mean, we were just, without doing any business development, we are already sort of oversubscribed on the project, right? and we have had so much interest, even at Mobile World Congress, right? Huge interest from the operator community, from the service provider community, from the cloud community, because this is effectively, it can be that network automation platform that people don't need to think about once they go beyond it. Now, I'll also tell you, the term orchestration has always been loosely used. And so, the devil's in the details, where you sort of define, service orchestration, or, VNFs or VIMs, and there's so many layers of the stack. And everything at the end of the day needs to be designed, needs to be pushed to the infrastructure as well as the hardware and software that goes below it, and then operated, right? Managed, policed, data analytics. There's so many things to be done. So, we loosely coined that term orchestration in this, right? It's nothing to do with the music director, but you know what?
Sure.
That's effectively it. How do you,
what it's doing, really? Yeah.
How do you make the network dance, right? To your tunes.
Yeah.
Right?
Not just a bunch of noise. Yeah, you gotta have something that actually makes sense to people. So yeah.
So that music is coming out on the other side and not misquoted symphony. Anyway.
Yeah. No, exactly. It makes sense at all. And I guess it sounds like from what you're saying too, and this being kind of oversubscribed already, I'm guessing that the member reaction to all of this has been pretty positive. I know initially, it seemed that, when I looked at it initially, it seemed a little, not strange, but I'm sure a bit of work involved, because ECOMP was kind of driven to an extent by one carrier, and Open-O, was obviously, he came up from various carriers as well, but they're both kind of carrier driven to an extent. And so bringing these together, it seems like there's always probably some work involved there, because carriers do have a bit of an ego at times. And so I'm sure for you guys having to kind of massage all of that, I'm sure it was a bit of work, but it sounds like it's been pretty well received at this point. Yes.
It's been well received. And I think to AT&T and China Mobile's credit, right? I think the intention as well as the architectural discussions were extremely fruitful. And, with a common cause of moving the orchestration agenda forward. And the great news is, orchestration is one piece, but then there's the policies, and then there's the management and the analytics, right? And then the design studios. There's a lot more to it than just orchestration. So I think the communities have definitely come back come together very nicely. And we will be launching this, all the details around ONS this year as well in April. So it's really very timely that, we have about a year of runway for carriers globally to be ready for automation before 5G. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, you're right. The timing of it does seem very, very good, because again, operators are getting more and more anxious with the whole 5G stuff, and obviously we're still, a couple years away in terms of standards and things like that. But to get this going and get this nailed down before all that comes along, it's going to be very important. Like you said earlier, kind of trying to manage all that's coming along with 5G. You really need to have the automation in place to make all that work. So
correct.
That's the timing of this does seem like it works out pretty well for everybody involved.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I guess for the operators out there, or industry, the vendors, the operators who are getting involved in this, I guess what should they see in terms of a benefit from ONAP? For bringing these things together, what's kind of like your quick little speech to them to say, hey, this is what you're going to see, as a benefit from these things coming together, and a lot of work obviously happening behind the scenes, but this is what's going to benefit you guys moving forward.
So the first and the most important benefit is, two of the world's largest carriers, and in fact, 6 of them right now have joined forces, and a lot more in the pipeline. But effectively, we did some rough calculation. We're talking about almost up to 40% of the world's global subscriber base, right? So we're talking about a platform that is enabling and influencing and impacting, right, almost 40%, right? And this is just the beginning. This is just the start. And so the criticality of this project is significant. So if you do development here, and if you build a community around ONAP, now you have one harmonized vision where, you're not fighting models. You're not saying is it Yang or is it Tosca, right? Is it, brownfield or greenfield? Is it, this SDN or overlay SDN? Is it, do I, do logging this way or that way? Most importantly, if you're a VNF vendor, which think of it as a kind of an app store developer, if you're a VNF supplier or vendor, and you are a consumer of VNFs, you have 20 VNFs coming at you, all look differently, right? And so VNF onboarding is a big part of this project as well. So it will be extremely easy, because there's going to be a set of VNF guidelines that are published with this, which allow, the start, the stop, the pause, the log. There's things like that a VNF, does not differentiate on, right? It's just business as usual. It's kind of boring to a lack of, for a lack of a better word, just to plug it in. And so if we do consistently, get to that point where we can plug these things in fairly seamlessly, the innovation of new services actually goes much faster, right? So to the ecosystem of vendors, VNFs, and end users, this is a fantastic, simplified way of doing business. Now, to an enterprise, there's a lot of value too. Now, I know, enterprise and carriers, who owns the edge? How do you come together? But the great thing is when you are reliant on enterprise services, right? Or when enterprise is reliant on carriers for services, whether it's hosting or business services or just straight private lines or SD-WAN or whatever, the automation part of it is critical, right? Because whether you're moving things from private cloud to public cloud, or we're moving it on a hosted network somewhere, the more simplification you have, the better it is, right? And to give an example, people will say, oh, all this automation is going to have an impact on OpEx. Yes, it will have an impact on OpEx, but the people that get freed up because they're not managing CLIs and basic things, they are all being retrained to write applications. They're writing scripts and automation frameworks to allow more services to come in, right? So we're kind of moving up the value chain with this whole platform development.
That makes sense. That's a great way to point out, because I know when people talk a lot about virtualization, this move towards these virtualized networks for operators. That is one of the things that kind of gets brought up occasionally. Is this is kind of a move to not reduce jobs, but kind of to change jobs for a lot of people. And like you said, to kind of describe it that way, it's not getting rid of jobs per se. It's just kind of moving people from doing things that perhaps again automation can easily take care of, and moving those people to do something else that might be a little more value add to the organization. Exactly.
I mean, move into apps and services and more regression testing to get the reliability up. So there's plenty of areas where manpower or labor is definitely a bit of a shortage.
Sure, that makes sense. Well, I guess for the Linux Foundation itself, you guys do kind of lead a lot of different initiatives out there. I mean, will this have any sort of impact on maybe ODL or OPNFV or any of the other ones that have kind of really gained a lot of traction in the telecom space? Do you expect this to crossbreed with those initiatives as well to kind of help the process along, or how will that all kind of play together in the big Linux Foundation cavalcade of acronyms?
Fair enough. So I think one of the big things that I've been pushing out as a message is while it's a bunch of acronyms that sit as and we been in networking 30 years, right? We are used to creating new acronyms. So I'm as guilty of that as anybody else. But one of the things we are doing is we are sort of harmonizing, projects and programs at like a horizontal layer. So you have a data plane acceleration layer, and there's a bunch of projects there. Then you have control plane, and there's a bunch of projects. And there's nothing wrong with having multiple projects that all are focusing on either a narrow use case or a broader use case with interoperability, right? So you've got that layer, you've got the orchestration layer, you've got the analytics layer. So within the layers, we're looking at how interoperability as well as harmonization can happen, right? Now, the great news about ONAP, to your specific question, is ONAP is again ECOMP plus Open-O. Both of them are built on ODL, right? So the foundation of that is ODL as a controller. Now, what we are doing is, as the thing merges, that's your first start. Now, we will have requirements to add more controllers. We'll have requirements to add more, SDN third-party agents, right? We'll have more VNFs. So as requirements get built in, all of these projects have a role to play, right? For example, OPNFV does an end-to-end testing and automation of all the pieces. So there are scripts that constantly, go and test everything down from FDIO, which is all the way down to the data plane, up into the application layer. So there's a place for each of these projects, and what we are looking or envisioning is, at a minimum, they need to be part of a solution that gets stitched together for easy deployment and rapid acceleration, right? I mean, my goal is to have production-ready solutions this year, right? We have production-ready components. We need to go to production-ready solutions.
Interesting. I was going to ask you a bit about, I guess, the timing of this going forward. And obviously, like you said, we'll probably hear more about this at the ONS show coming up in April as well. I guess as you look over the kind of the timeline for this over the next 12 months towards the end of the year, what do you see as maybe being some big milestones for ONAP kind of going forward here?
So the first thing we're doing is we are, setting up the board, setting up the governance, setting up the architectures and the code. The great news is we have production-ready code that AT&T has already deployed in the network today, and that, it's post R1 from Open-O. So as we bring that together, we will have a release cadence where we have R1s, but more importantly, we're using, CI/CD type techniques to have, 2-week sprints, but more importantly, 4 to 6 month releases. Okay. So in each of these releases, we have a theme that basically says, add more features, add more architectural harmonization, add more support for, third party, etc. And so the technical community will come up with a roadmap in the month. Those are all the details that we will issue at the mini summit and in ONS.
Makes sense. Okay. And then any hints at this point of what the naming structure is going to be for the releases? I know with OPNFV it's river based, and I know with ODL they use I think the periodic table for things. Any hints at what we can expect in terms of the names for the ONAP releases?
Well, let's put it this way. Whatever I tell you will be wrong.
All right.
So let the community decide what
Okay.
the right way to name it is. I'm sure there is always opinions. That's, it's easy to get, 1,000 lines of code written in a day and make it test and work. It's not easy to get a naming going.
That must be the hardest thing to do, is trying to get the name structure in place, because like you said, everybody has an opinion on it, I'm sure. So that's probably the worst part of it all.
Yeah, no, I think the good news about this is, because it's Linux Foundation networking, and we've been doing this for quite some time. There's a governance and a structure within which you can discuss and debate and reach a conclusion. And it's pretty fast and rapid. And that's what I think people appreciate, the value of Linux Foundation, right? And that's why you've seen projects like, ODL or OPNFV, very, very successful, right, in terms of adoption and deployment.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, Arpit, we definitely appreciate the insight. Obviously, I know it's a new initiative for you guys and a lot of work still to do coming up. Obviously, with the show coming up, we have some more news there. And but again, I know a lot of work for you guys coming up ahead on it as well. But we definitely appreciate kind of a good high-level talk on kind of what came out of this. And I'm sure as we move forward on this too, we can touch base again and fill in some of the holes as this all kind of comes together. But like I said, definitely appreciate the insight on the topic so much. And thanks again. And hopefully, like I said, we'll touch base again soon on the topic. Well, thanks for watching this week's show, and make sure to check out our next NFV SDN Reality Check when we're scheduled to speak with Viptela on the SD-WAN market. Thanks for watching.
NFV SDN Reality Check with Dan Meyer is a production of RCR TV. To suggest show topics or to reach Dan, you can find him on email, dmeyer@rcrwireless.com, and on Twitter @Meyer_Dan. For more Dan, news on NFV SDN and everything wireless, find your way over to rcrwireless.com.